Hello and welcome. The coronavirus has caused severe damage to the finances of both the state and central governments. In many cases, states are seeing a huge fall in their revenues, whether it's from GST collections or even collections from stamp duty, sales of petrol and diesel, and what have you. So in a situation like this, what happens? Who is going to make up for that gap? Is it going to be the state? Is it going to be the center? Both of them earn money from you and me, that is the taxpayer who pays taxes, whether by buying goods and services or by paying income tax. So how does this income get distributed, and where is this gap going to get filled? Let's understand this a little better as I'm joined by Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist of Care Ratings, and who recently put out a report looking at center and state finances and whether they're equipped or how well they're equipped at this time. Madan, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, hi Govind, and nice to be here. I think this is a very pertinent issue which you have pointed out, because just a couple of days back, we heard that several states had given permission for opening of liquor shops. So that was quite amazing, because normally at these times when we are told that people should stay away, we suddenly had a case of saying that liquor shops were open, and we have hordes of people coming across the country. I've heard right from places like Dehradun to Kerala to what you call Karnataka, even Bombay, I think, had it open for some time. So the whole thing is that why is it that the government was so eager to open liquor shops when even non-essential commodities were not allowed to open? So I think this goes back to what you were pointing out about the state finances, because we think that we have reached a situation where we went in for a shutdown, and at that particular point of time, people like you and I complained that we were not getting our full salaries, or we were out of work, and the common man, migrants, I think all of them were hounded out of their cities, were trying to go back to their hometowns. And we all suffered in terms of not having access to essentials. And we were generally told that, okay, this is all a part of the entire process. We're saving overall humanity, and we'll have to bear up this particular cost. But now we've had 1 month of shutdown in April, a part of it in May, and probably this will carry on for the whole month. And I think now the governments have realized that they have a problem on hand, because all this time it was a case of individuals, households who had problems, companies who had problems, and we were the ones who were lamenting that the shutdown should be stopped at some point of time. But today we have seen that the government faces this kind of a conundrum, because you've already targeted certain expenditures. There's certain payments which you have to make, things like your salaries. You'll have to make your interest payments, and there are other kind of committed expenditures which you cannot really dodge. And that at the same time, you've realized that you're not getting the kind of revenue which you should be earning. And some of the things which you mentioned, like GST, is very pertinent, because we always said there was a thumb rule saying that 1 lakh crores of GST was being earned every month. Now, just think of a situation in April where the PMI services say it came down to 5. I think the PMI for manufacturing was in the 20s, which means that activity actually came to a virtual standstill. And this also meant that your GST collections couldn't have been more than 15 or 20% of what was targeted. Similarly, if you look at states, they have their own finances in terms of their own excise duties, which they impose, sales tax on certain commodities which are out of the GST ambit. All these collections automatically got affected. And we were thinking all this time that probably the center will announce that the states can have more leeway when it comes to the fiscal deficit, because currently the FRBM rules say that states cannot spend more than 3% of their GSDP as their fiscal deficit, which is basically their overall borrowings. But no such announcement has come. We also felt that there would be another stimulus coming from the center where they would be spending more money. But the center also has a similar problem, because it's not able to receive revenue. As I mentioned, income tax goes out. If I'm out of job, I don't pay income tax. Companies make losses, they can't pay corporate tax. We don't have the opportunity to spend on goods, so the GST collections get affected. With the exception of a few minimal imports which are coming in, your custom collections get affected. So in this kind of scenario, I think overall revenue generation has been affected. And I think the states, the pertinent point which you have raised, is that they have something called their own tax revenue, and they have something which is transfers which come from the center. And I think they have been affected on both these counts. So this is one of the reasons why we have seen that some states have also increased the taxes on petroleum products, the opening of liquor shops, because you get a substantial amount of your income from these products. For example, if I give you an example of, say, petroleum products, the center and states have been collecting something like 6 lakh crores every year in the form of taxes. Now, if vehicles are not on the road, you can't run them, consumption is down, the basic price of crude oil has come down. So far, I think lots of us had missed the point that when the crude oil price came down and I continued paying the same price for my petrol and diesel, the OMCs were actually making money on it. They had kept it. So now what the government has done is you've transferred it from the OMCs to the government, so their own coffers get filled up, but still there's
So
no
OMCs
consumption.
are the oil companies. Yeah.
Oil manufacturing company, exactly. Your BPCL, HPCL, IOCL. So they were actually making this profit for maybe a month or so. And now when the government increases the taxes, they're saying that the consumer doesn't pay more, but the OMCs lose their profit and that money gets transferred to the governments. But the problem is that if I'm not running my cars, I'm not running my trucks, which was being done earlier, the overall consumption is going to be down. So that's where the tricky situation is. States are very much dependent upon the center for transfers. They need the local economies to move. Only then will your own tax revenue increase. And as you mentioned, things like we're all sitting at home, there are no property deals, your stamp duty comes down. And that's where you've seen that the states are also staring at a kind of a crisis situation.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you pay your salaries. I can't pay if I don't own the revenue.
Right, and so Madan, I mean, give us a sense on where or how this huge gap and yawning gap can actually get bridged, and where would anyone begin?
Yeah, actually, the only way to fill this particular gap is that the center and the states have to increase the fiscal deficit. When I say increase the fiscal deficit, they need to borrow more money. Now, how do you borrow? You'll have to borrow from the market. And I think the market is already suspecting that government borrowing is going to increase. That's reasons why, even though we have surplus liquidity in the system, the GSET yields still remain where they are. They're still sticky in the region of 6.1. At times they go 6.2. But the basic thing is that they're expecting a lot of borrowing to come into the market. And I think this is where the government is also a bit hesitant of bringing in too much of paper, because if there's too much of paper in the market, we can actually think of a situation where there is oversupply and yields go up in the market, and they don't want this situation to happen. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are talking of saying that maybe the RBI should start monetizing the deficit. And I think in one of the interviews on the website, the RBI, they have said they're not considering it, but it cannot be ruled out in the sense that it could always be something back on the table. So we need to have more borrowings from the center and states, because if I'm not in a position to pay the taxes which I'm supposed to be paying, and you have to continue with your regular committed expenditures, then you will have to borrow more money from the market.
And could you, I mean, can you estimate for us what this will take? As in, so one is, as you said, there is a deficit, maybe we print more money, but the gap is huge. I mean, I was looking at Kerala, for instance. I mean, just one example. GST collections of maybe 150 crore this month, in contrast to maybe 1,800 crores a few months ago. So and I'm sure it's the same roughly for most states. And going with your figure of 10 to 15% collections compared to peak. So at the same time, the expenditure, or a lot of it, continues. Salaries and pensions are being paid to government employees. There's a lot of expenditure that goes on into infrastructure, ongoing infrastructure, everything, all the services that we are benefiting from and enjoying, whether it may be public health, which in itself is a challenge right now, and so many things. So how do we then actually begin to even solve this problem?
No, I think solving this problem will only mean that you'll have to start borrowing more money. Because as long as I have a shutdown, I'm not going to have my tax revenue flowing in. As long as I'm stuck indoors, there are not going to be any property deals taking place, which automatically, and if I'm going to meet my expenses, I will have to necessarily borrow. So today, for example, if you look at some of the state government borrowings which have gone through, the average cost of borrowing has actually gone up in the market. We are seeing the state government borrowing. I think they borrow every fortnight or so. We have them coming and borrowing in the market. And if you look at the average yield on SDLs, they've actually gone up. One of the reasons is that because there is an expectation that state governments are going to come up with so much more borrowing in the market. If you're looking at the center, I think even today, I think most of their expenditures are being met by the regular kind of borrowing which is going in the market. But at some point of time, I think if they're going to go in for non-committed expenditure, you will have to keep looking at alternative sources. And if your tax revenue is not going to start ticking, it'll have to be more borrowing. And I think this is going to be a major puzzle for the government, and I think it has to be cracked at some point of time. And I think this is one of the reasons why there's a lot of pressure on the government to say that let's get out of the lockdown, because we're really getting nowhere today. We really don't know what we're looking out for. Everybody says flattening of the curve. What does the flattening mean? I really don't know. Because if you see the number of cases which are being registered every day, they're just increasing. Especially in a state like Maharashtra, we've seen it has the highest number of cases. As you test more people, you'll be getting more cases. Does that mean that economic activity can come to a standstill? The answer is probably not. And if you see even globally, I think a number of European countries who were into the thick of it are thinking of opening up the economies and saying we should learn to live with the virus rather than just stay at home and hope that things sort out on their own. So in short, I think the state governments and the central government will have to borrow more. We'll have to forget about these fiscal targets which we have. Because even today, if you look at maybe I would say a handful of states are working at less than 3% of fiscal deficit. 3% fiscal deficit, which means they have fiscal space within the FRBM rules. And that would also include a state like something like Maharashtra or Gujarat. But then we need to see that these numbers are not going to work out at the end of the day because my denominator is going to fall sharply, the GSDP numbers, because if growth doesn't take place, my denominator comes down, my expenses are going to go up, my revenues are going to come down, which means that these fiscal deficit numbers really don't make any sense. Right now, we have targeted 3%, but we may never reach this 3%, which means that we have to just forget about these numbers and go with more pragmatic borrowing numbers.
Right. Right. Last question, Madan. So different states contribute differently. States like Maharashtra, Gujarat, which are more industrialized, obviously contribute more to the central tax pool. And there are other states which contribute less, but the redistribution happens by the center. So do you see all of this getting affected because the main states where the industrial activity happens or where there is more contribution are obviously not contributing as much? And therefore, we are all as a country likely to get affected even more?
See, the way in which the distribution works is that the Finance Commission has laid down the formula. I think around 42% of whatever is collected from certain taxes get distributed to the states based on a particular formula. So it's generally a general contribution which comes from the country, from the states, which goes to the center, and then it's divided across this entire pool of states which are there. So if there is no activity happening in the more industrialized states like say Maharashtra and Gujarat, say, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Bengal, then automatically the divisible pool itself is going to come down. And when the divisible pool comes down, it also means that you get less in return from the center. So the center has a problem that it won't be able to honor their transfers to the states for the simple reason that the funds are not there. And the states on their own are not able to garner the resources because the states are not operational. So it all goes back to saying that we have to get back to being operational. Otherwise, this kind of thing will just not work.
Madan Sabnavis, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts.